Hi, I'm your host, Rick Sessinghaus, and excited to launch Flow Golf Podcast. Each episode, we will share stories, interview experts, and share cutting-edge strategies for peak performance. Here's my co-host, Hallam Morgan, to explain more about FlowCode Golf.
Thanks, Rick. FlowCode Golf is a framework of strategies, principles, and techniques that take us from fear to the state of flow, the state of optimal performance, and the zone where we play our best golf. You can find out more about FlowCode Golf at www.flowcode.golf. And I just want to finish up by saying this podcast is as much your podcast as it is ours. So please ask questions, provide feedback, and get engaged. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Rick, back again for another episode. I can't wait to discuss today emotions. I wanted to go into this because emotions are such an important part of performance. And I feel like there's different areas in which your emotions become vital. And that's priming. So making sure that you prime your emotions for performance, ensuring that you know how to manage your emotions in the moment when things are coming at you, curveballs are thrown at you. How do you manage that situation? And then also actually post-performance. How do you manage some of the emotions of certain situations you've had to deal with? So I want to start off with that priming. And I'm sure you've done a lot of work with various players on priming your emotions, priming your state for optimal performance. So what are some of those techniques, tools? And if you have any stories as well, that'd be great to hear.
Sure. I think the key thing is for everybody to understand that emotions do play an important part in performance. Emotions will affect our focus, our ability to focus in the present moment. When we think about golf, your emotions will affect how your hands feel, right? Is there tension? Are we relaxed? Are we calm? Our decision-making, if I'm frustrated, will tend to be faster and riskier. And so when we have emotions, yes, it's something, a feeling in my body, but it also will affect our cognitive abilities too, to be in the present moment. So most people, which we will talk about here in a moment, is they think of emotions as something that happens after something, after a bad shot, after a good shot, after that. And you and I both know that, yes, you should work on that. And there's skills and tools to do that. But why don't we ask a better question? What is the emotional state you want to be in when you play golf? And that's more that priming that you and I talk a lot about, is instead of people kind of, I say, being like, well, I hope I'm confident. I hope I'm, and yeah, let's just see how the round starts. To me, that's not being proactive and really training what emotions are, which is you do have a choice in how you feel. And you and I talk a lot about pre-round routines, right? And, when I work with very good players, sometimes they'll build up, this is such an important event. Oh, am I got to do this? Da, 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 da. And they're already maybe talking themselves into stress or fear or excitement. Now, excitement seems positive, but do you want to be on the tee really, really excited? I don't know. I don't know for golf. I'm not sure. So you have to now, one, be very, very clear. What is the best emotional state for you to play in, right? That could be everything from passion to excited, to engaged, to focused, to confident, to calm, to peaceful. There's a lot of different emotional states. Think back when you played your best golf, what emotional state were you in? So that's kind of the first question. Then as I backtrack with some of these players, it could be Collin before the Open Championship, right? He knows he's in the final group. Those type of things, yet you don't do anything different because you're in the final group to winning a major championship. You would do the same things you did on Thursday, Friday, Saturday to get you into Sunday. And I think that's what he does quite well, is manages his state before the round begins. So many of us do not have pre-round routines built around emotional states. And so sometimes it seems very simple, but it does require some discipline. Is first, identify the emotional state you want to be in. Two is what could trigger that. So it could be as simple as listening to your favorite music as you drive to the course, which puts you in a different emotional state. Some of it could be, I visualize myself in that state on the first tee. Sometimes it can be stuff on the range that is happening 30 minutes before my first tee shot, where I'm not only hitting a shot, I experience it, I'm visualizing a shot, I'm taking that in. There's a lot of things that we can be very proactive or, being able to be conscious of the shift in emotion. So, I don't know about your ideas about the priming, but I think it's identifying it first. We have different auditory triggers. We have breathing. We have different ways we use our body that could help us get into that emotional state. So I think priming is something that is lost on a lot of the players.
Absolutely. I think you said something really important there, Rick, and it brings in actually self-awareness, because there's various players that they'll have totally different emotional states that they perform at the highest level. So you look at someone like, and I bring in Ian Poulter in the Ryder Cup. He's known for delivering, being the postman. When he shows up to the Ryder Cup in that kind of emotional state, that is the excited, that is the kind of intense state. But then there's also other people. You look at the Tigers, you look at Collin, and actually it's this calm, it's this relaxed, it's this kind of focused relaxation state that brings the highest level of performance out in them. So I think first of all, there's that self-awareness point. Go back to when you played your best stuff, as you said. Find out the state that allows you to perform the best. And don't try and just copy other people because you've seen what they do and what works best for them. Work out what works best for you, and then find the routines, the techniques that are going to help you get to that position. And I think, like you said, there's tons of different ways. One of them, and I actually remember hearing a story, a guy called Simon Khan. He won the BMW Championship. I can't remember what year it was, at Wentworth. Phenomenal golfer. Coaches actually a lot of the players that I work with now as well. And I remember hearing the story of him showing up to the final round, to the BMW PGA Championship. And he was actually running a bit late. So he didn't have time to fully prepare on the driving range for his final round. So he decided, instead of panicking too much about that, he prioritized his emotional state over to some extent, his preparation, physical preparation on the technical side. And he went into the changing rooms, looked in the mirror, and just said some affirmations to himself, said some words, reminded himself that he was capable, and ultimately primed his emotional state for that performance. He went out. I think he hit a bit of a dodgy first tee shot, but ultimately went on to win the competition. And I think that is where some people need to really think about what's more important. And in my opinion, it's the state that you're in to perform, more so than some of the other elements that we tend to focus on. So really, really vital there. And there's tons of ways, like you said, inside the platform, we've got the cognitive mindsets, we've got the reframing methods, we've got the breathing exercises, whether that's slow breaths, whether that's dolphin breaths with a breath hold. They can be really, really powerful ways to increase this deep relaxation and actually help you with that focused relaxation state as you step onto the golf course.
Yeah. And I think just the simple question is, how do you want to show up to the first tee? Right in and of itself, you and I talk about pre-shot routines, about being clear on the shot you want to play. Now we're asking, be clear on the emotion you want to be in and the feelings you want to have. And I think that helps people get clear on what they want instead of what they don't want. And if that's the intention to show up on the first tee, we already have our first goal, a process goal, but we have a goal that we want to achieve based on an emotional state. How do you want to show up to the first tee? I think is a great framing of the round of golf.
Absolutely. And it's actually something you hear so many successful people across the board. This isn't just golf, but that priming of your emotional state is absolutely vital in whatever you're trying to do, because it's often not about just the showing up. It's actually about how you show up. And this is the same away from competition as well, right, Rick? This is the same in training. This is the same in various other ways or areas in which you improve your performance and your development. If you're at the driving range, the question is, yeah, of course you may show up. There's many people that are showing up, but how are you showing up? And I think that's
a great point. I think with a lot of my players, they may say they want to be in a competitive mindset, a competitive emotional state, and you hit it right on the head. If I can use that same competitive mindset in the gym or in the range, you're already now reinforcing the emotional state you want to be in competition. When you're playing a tournament, it's like, I want to be competitive with myself on the range and that 4-footer I'm going to hit. And I think that's a good point. This is not, as you and I talk about a lot, this is not just for golf, everybody. This is you being much more aware of how you want to be in life. And you're going to have some adversity and you're going to have things that don't go your way. But if I already go to an event or a performance and I'm very clear, this is how I want to show up, I think it's a good first step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving then, Rick, into the management of emotions as you're in the moment. So if you're on the golf course, you hit a poor shot, you get a bit of a stroke of bad luck, and actually being able to manage your emotions in that moment. What are some of the ways that you talk to players or you talk to your clients and how they can deal with those kinds of situations?
Sure. So I'm going to, throw myself under the bus here. But part of when you coach something, it usually came from you needed to learn it yourself. And I definitely, part of being a competitive golfer back in college and beyond was managing that emotional state. I came from other sports like football, where if you got mad, you just try to hit somebody harder on the next play, or you could run hard, and some of those emotions would dissipate a little bit. Golf, I had a challenge with. When I did have a poor golf shot, how did I interpret it? And unfortunately, I interpreted it in a very self-critical way. Hit a bad shot, let's say it goes into the trees off the tee. It would be, you suck, Rick. That was awful. I can't believe how bad you are. And it immediately went to that. So unfortunately, my post-shot routine was very habitual, and it was only about critical, bad, this, and there was never a learning part of it. And I remember in high school, I remember a little too clearly, but it was like a 90-yard shot with a sand wedge from the middle of the fairway, and I chunked it. And back then we didn't have stand bags. My bag was laying on the ground, and I just took that sand wedge and I just tomahawked and slammed my gloves. Now I broke the sand wedge, which okay, but then the next day, because this was the last hole of the tournament, I went to the range and realized that I had broke the driver, the wedge, and a 9-iron with the same swipe, because I went into it so hard. So I got a lot of bang for my buck on that tomahawk slamming. I broke four clubs. Now that's embarrassing to say that. And I think that was an aha moment for me. Like, hey, how could you allow a result of a golf shot to have that big of an impact on your emotional state? And I think that's where, honestly, was one of my points of going down. There had to be an answer for this, right? So I teach a lot of post-shot routine. I know you and I work on this with our clients. Is you're going to hit a poor golf shot, okay? First off is, I think people, their definition of a poor golf shot is almost like 90% of their shots they think are poor. And I would say, hey, let's manage that and say, in reality, when we look at dispersions and we look at patterns, probably only 10 to 15% of shots that are really, really poor, right? Other ones are just average shots. But we always look at, it could have been better. It could have been a lot of things, but the ball went 40 yards left. Let's deal with it. Okay. And so now, instead of being critical, I'm always in learning mode. I want to know why it went left. Okay. So this is not about, I joke with clients all the time. It's not about me hitting it, pumping it into the trees, maybe in somebody's backyard, and saying, you're supposed to be positive. Golly gee, Rick, that's okay. I think that's delusional. Okay. I think that's ridiculous. But if I now go and I say that shot is a poor golf shot instead of you suck, Rick. Okay. Then I could go, okay, why did that ball go left? And you and I do a lot of post-shot routine stuff where we want them to learn, first off, mentally, was I committed to the shot or not? And then if I was like, hey, yeah, I had a clear picture, Rick, I had, blah, 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 then it was an execution issue. It's a poor golf swing. And do you know your swing patterns enough to know why a ball goes where it goes? This is not about fixing per se, but it is about processing it in a way to minimize the intensity of that emotion. I'm still going to leave that shot that I just pumped into the trees disappointed. I am. But instead of full anger mode, I have now minimized the intensity of that emotion. So managing it is one, putting in perspective. Yeah, that shot went offline. Why did it go there is a much better question than just self-critical voice. So that's kind of how I frame it.
Absolutely. No, that's something that it relates so much to a lot of the work I've been doing with my players recently, which is this curious versus critical mindset. So asking those questions, asking the why, and actually almost having a little bit of a kind of like decision tree process of, okay, yes, like you said, was this mental? Was this technical? And actually going through that process, and it removes the emotion. So I think that's really, really powerful. Something that you spoke a lot about there, Rick, was this learning mindset. And it reminded me of, again, a mindset that I believe so many top performers are in, and they find a way to be there. And I'll explain how in a second, but this anti-fragile mindset. So no matter when they have tough situations thrown at them, they have struggles, they have curveballs, they have obstacles, all of those things, they find a way to actually make them more powerful, to make them beneficial to their development. And the way that they do that is by creating this learning mindset, by being the learner. So whenever they have an obstacle thrown at them, they just learn from it. They find ways, they ask questions, they're curious, and they see it as an opportunity to develop. And I think finding that is so, so important, because too many people say you need to be robust in life. You need to be robust. You need to be robust. But the problem is that robust ultimately still has a breaking point. Anti-fragile, however, the more stuff that's thrown at you, the more difficulty, the more obstacles, you just become stronger. And every single one of those makes you stronger. So having that learning mindset is so, so powerful. I think it's really, really key.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. I know we'll talk on a separate podcast a little bit more about that anti-fragile idea, because, you know, I was working with a client yesterday and we talked about, you know, would you rather be in, you know, lose the lead at the end, right? Which some people may say choking or whatever. Let's say you play poorly at the end, or just have a 20th place finish. And it was just kind of and you know, what I was trying to push is that let's have the opportunity to choke.
Yep.
That's the only time where you get better. But if we're just always kind of like 40th place, just barely make the cut, and I don't think we push ourselves to know where we can go with it. And we're going to choke. We're going to have poor performances when we don't want them. And I think that's part of this learning. Yet at the time, we talk about struggle phase all the time with flow, is there's going to be some struggle. Okay. But guess what? The tunnel down there's some light back down there where we can get into a flow state based on understanding what that struggle was. So I think that's something that you and I are going to talk about in a little more detail another time. So
just to finish up on this emotional management in the kind of in the moment conversation, I also think what's so important is your judgment and actually thinking about your judgment. I think so often we judge things in the short term and we very rarely think about what it's going to look like in the long term. And essentially, I think every experience is neither good nor bad. And we have to take that mindset into it as well. Because I think we often think, okay, if we hit a shot left and it looks like it's in a bit of trouble, we instantly jump to the conclusion that that's bad, that it's a bad situation. But we just never know in the world of golf if that is, even after the next shot, if that's actually going to turn out well for us. But equally, we never look at it in the long term. We never look towards the long term and say, well, this difficult situation that I'm facing right now could potentially be really powerful for me in the future. So I think that helps with that emotional management in the moment as well. Just this internal belief that everything is neither good nor bad. And actually, as soon as we put a judgment on it, we determine the meaning that it has. So I think it's really, really powerful to think both short-term, long-term. Could this, and I was talking to one of my players literally just earlier today, and we were talking about an experience where they're on the first tee, hit one down the middle, lost ball, couldn't find it, just got down there, it disappeared. Had to go back to the tee, heart beating. It's an important tournament. It's a qualifier, and they're thinking, "Blimey, this is not the way I intended this to start." Having that now that's passed a few days. Looking back, it's like, actually, I'm really grateful for that experience because I've learned a lot. I've learned that I'm able to cope with those situations. So now going into the next stage, I'm confident that no matter what curveball's thrown at me, I know how to deal with it. So it's actually in the short term, you can imagine there's heart beating fast. There's concern. It's in the short term, it seems bad. When we look at it in the long term and we reflect backwards, we actually start to appreciate that was a really positive experience. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, no. And I think about from like, I'm a swing coach too. And you look at when we first learn how to hit, let's say, a flop shot for the first time, right? We look forward to the experience, but the first few are going to be ugly. Okay. There's going to be some chunks. There's going to be some skulls hitting somebody, in somebody's backyard or something like that. But once you do enough of the repetitions, what was that challenge is now something, or what used to be looked upon as maybe a threat or a fear, now is something like you want to take on. And it's the same thing with the emotions, is that I got through that. I'm stronger for it. Next time it shows up, I know I can deal with it. To me is just a very, very powerful way to manage it. I want to jump in real quick because it's something that you have reminded me of before, is managing emotions certainly can be cognitive in nature, reframing things, but it's also a physiological response. And, if I'm frustrated, which unfortunately that's how I played a lot of my competitive golf, my grip pressure will tighten, my tempo will quicken, and now my sequence is off. So it's now not a swing issue. It's now a mental, emotional issue as I move forward. And, both you and I work a lot on the physiological stuff of breathing, and it might be, I use something called expanded awareness, where you kind of look out in the distance and try to see 180 degrees around you while breathing. Give me, what are some of your best when you talk about shifting physiological feelings that you do?
So for me, it's the breathing would always be my number one, purely because there's so much communication between your breath and your physiology. Your breath ultimately determines a lot of the physical reactions that are happening in your body. So if you're breathing very shallow and very fast, you're telling your brain that you're stressed, that you're anxious, that you're in a fight, or you're in that kind of fight or flight situation. Whereas if you can actually calm your breathing down, if you can slow your breathing right down, if you can make it deeper, and if you can actually make yourself more relaxed, you're communicating to your mind, to your body, that you're actually in control, that you're in a state of relaxation, that you're in a state of focus. And I think that's the best place to start. And what people will actually realize, and if you notice this next time you are in this kind of stressed state, you feel like you're a little bit out of control on the golf course, you're maybe in this bit of a panic state because something's just gone wrong, just very quickly become aware of your breathing. Become aware of like, okay, how am I breathing? Am I breathing very fast, very shallow? Because if you are, and you most likely are, just try and change your breathing for a short space of time. And just by doing that, you'll see the impact it has then on the message that's sent to your mind and the fact that you're now back in control of your physiology. So I think that's really, really important. Equally, it's actually really interesting that your interpretation of the state is just as vital. So excitement and anxious, this anxious physiology are actually very similar.
Yes.
So in an excited state, your palms get a bit sweaty, your heart rate might increase, and it's exactly the same as this anxious state. Your palms get sweaty, your heart rate increases. And often it actually comes down to our perception of the situation. Do we perceive it as this challenge? Do we perceive it as exciting? Or do we perceive it as this threat, as something that we should be anxious about? So just really start to consider that as well. I think that's really, really important. You can change the physiology, you can change your heart rate, lower it and all sorts. But you can also change your interpretation of the situation and of the physical reactions that are happening.
Exactly. And along those lines, we certainly talk about priming, we're managing, and I think putting the combination together, right, after an event can be very, very important. And I do, you and I have our clients fill out assessment forms, and some of it has to do with emotions, right? It has to do with the self-awareness of maybe a shot did change emotional state, or maybe on the first tee, my heart was racing. Awesome. Let's use that as data points for us to figure out in the future, would I have done anything differently in my pre-round warm-up? Would I have done anything to manage after I made a double bogey as I walked to the next? So that's part of also that post-round assessment that I don't think enough people do. They look at a scorecard and they may just chalk it up as a bad round. And I think there could have been a lot to learn from that. Same thing with a good round. I talk to Collin all the time when he wins a tournament. We want to know what led to that great performance from a mental and emotional standpoint also. So please, listeners out there, this is not all about the negative or unresourceful emotions. This is about understanding your emotional state, what triggers it to shift, how could we reframe it? And then next time, if I had that same experience, what would I do differently is really what you and I are always talking about with this self-awareness cycle.
Absolutely. I think a really key point there, and I remember this fantastic lady, Dr. Susan David, and she talks about the fact that emotions are actually neither positive or negative. They're actually just signals, or they're pieces of information and data.
Yes.
So that's the same. We go back to this curious mindset. You feel a certain emotion, instead of jumping to actually calling it positive or negative, actually just ask the question, what's this trying to tell me? It's trying to tell me something. And actually, when you start to dive into that kind of questioning, you start to bring the value out of the situation, of the emotion. I think it's really, really important. And I just want to dive into, actually, because it's very recent to this conversation, but for anyone that watched the end to the Formula One Championship, the F1 Championship recently between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, a really interesting scenario, a lot of controversy around how it ended. But the most important, or the most influential bit of that entire situation that I found anyway, was Lewis Hamilton's reaction to how it finished up. So people argue whether it was very unfair, how he ended up losing the championship, Max Verstappen won. But actually his reaction to the entire situation was very interesting. So you'll see him finish the race and he stays in his car for a period of time. He stays in there with his helmet on. And my interpretation, my assumption of what's going on there is that he's given himself just a safe environment, a place to kind of digest what's just happened, to maybe let out a little bit of anger, to kind of understand those signals. If he is feeling some frustration, if he is feeling some anger, he's kind of just rationalizing it. He's being curious, asking questions. Okay, what happened there? Why did I feel this way? But then you'll see, and he gives himself that period of time, he gets out his car and he actually goes almost immediately over and congratulates Max Verstappen on his win. And then he goes to the media and he has an interview with the media and doesn't complain, doesn't moan, doesn't talk anything about the situation. But actually what he does, very interestingly, is he makes it bigger than himself. He reminds people that congratulations to Max. It's an incredible feeling winning the championship. And also, he actually reminds people that we're in a pandemic. I wish everyone a very safe Christmas. And I think that's really, really powerful. What he's done there is he's reframed the situation. He's maybe given himself some time to vent some frustration, some anger. That's absolutely fine. Those emotions are there. We shouldn't necessarily bury them, but we should find a safe environment in which to release them. And then we should ask the question, how do I want to act now? What emotional state do I want to be in before I move into this next situation, this next environment? It comes almost all the way back to the priming situation. He's priming himself for a new environment, for a new circumstance. And he asks those questions. How do I want to show up right now? I want to show up with integrity. I want to show up and actually be a role model. And he's moved into that next situation with those thoughts exactly. And I thought it was really, really powerful how he went through that process. So I don't know what your thoughts are there, Rick, and if you've seen any stories or situations like that, but I just found that really inspirational and I thought really powerful in how he managed to probably assess in a micro sense what had just happened, but then very quickly rationalize it and decide how he wanted to show up in the next environment he was stepping into.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful story because there's so much on the line, right? We could have a definition of that was wrong. I can't believe that happened, and go into that story. And a lot of, bring it back to golf, a lot of people create these stories and they react to a story instead of maybe rewriting a new story and saying, hey, this is how I want to look at what happened and how to kind of move from there. And so when we put it all together, it's interesting that emotions is, for a lot of people, is in a reaction to a stimulus, right? There's a stimulus and a response, and most people just react and don't have a timeout enough to pay attention to what that signal is. Does that signal serve me or not? And if it does not, what can I do with it? And if it does, great, let's ride that track. But what we started off today is that emotions are also a choice. We can prime it through our thought processes. We can, the last thing I want to leave, and we'll do a separate one on this, is, gratitude is one of my favorite priming mechanisms. Is if I already go to the golf course grateful for the opportunity to go play golf, wow, I get to be outside. Wow, I get to go play with my friends. Wow, I signed up for this tournament. I get to go play in a tournament. And we frame it that way through gratitude. It really will set the filtering of how we're going to show up to that. So that's the one thing I kind of forgot a little bit earlier, but I think if we can be grateful for the opportunity, we look at it a whole different way, don't we?
Totally different. No, I think that's really powerful. And I think we could spend an entire conversation on gratitude.
Which we will.
And we definitely will. But there's so much I love about gratitude. And it's one of the first things that I definitely speak to a lot of my clients about, is making sure that we always constantly we're living in a grateful mindset. And I think it's so powerful. It's that first foundation that ultimately determines our perspective, and our perspective creates our reality. So really important point there, Rick.
Wonderful. Well, I'm grateful for this episode because I think we were able to share a lot with the listeners of being able to, yes, improve their performance, but let's think about it too. The enjoyment of that round of golf is through emotions. So great job and great episode. Thanks.
Pleasure as always, Rick. Have a good one. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I know you've received some incredible information, and if you would like to hear more, please subscribe. Rick, how can our listeners learn more about the FlowCode Golf Academy?
Are you a coach or a player? Well, I've created 2 free masterclasses. One for a coach to help you grow your mental game coaching business, and one for a player to master your mental game. Head over to www.flowcode.golf to gain free access now.